Hey there, it's Wayfair here, where delivery and setup are as easy as a few taps on your phone. You're relaxing in an old hammock, scrolling Wayfair's app, when you spot it, a brand new patio set. Next thing you know, Wayfair delivers it right to your patio and sets it up. Oh, you need a new grill too? All right, Wayfair's got you covered. With Wayfair's Room of Choice delivery and fast expert setup on qualifying orders, life gets a little easier. Visit wayfair.com or the Wayfair app.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Welcome to the Wired for Success podcast, your show for ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneurs who want to build million-dollar businesses without sacrificing their health, relationships, or happiness, who understand that in order to build their empire, they need a solid foundation, and that the more they are thriving, the more their business is thriving too. This show brings you the very best from science, self-development, and entrepreneurship to set you up for sustainable success. Hi, I'm Claudia Garbutt, the scientist turned mindset and high performance coach for entrepreneurs, and I help you get wired for success. Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Wired for Success podcast, where we talk about all things science, self-development, and entrepreneurship that help you get to that next level of success in your life and business. And my guest today is Dr. Suzy Green, the CEO and founder of the Positivity Institute, who has dedicated her career to the research and application of positive psychology and coaching psychology in workplaces, schools, and communities. As a clinical psychologist with extensive experience in the treatment of mental illness, Suzy is passionate about reducing the significant impact of mental health in our workplaces, schools, and communities. And as a coaching psychologist who has scientifically investigated the impact of evidence-based coaching, Suzy is also passionate about encouraging the use of coaching for performance and well-being enhancement for everyone. So welcome, Suzy, and thank you so much for taking the time to be on my show today. I'm really looking forward to this.
Oh, thank you, Claudia. It's my pleasure to be here.
Suzy, I would love to start by learning a little bit more about you and your journey so far. I always find it so fascinating just to reflect on the impact of our own experiences and how they shape who we become. So if you had to describe your childhood and upbringing in just 3 words, which words would you choose and why?
Positive, optimistic, and loving. So I'm very blessed, I guess, in many ways, Claudia. A privilege really to have had 2 wonderful parents. I just very sadly just lost my mum only about 2 months ago. She was 96 and my dad's still alive at 95 and not using a walking stick and not using a hearing aid. And so I was very fortunate to have 2 wonderful parents. Although I was the first person in my family to go to university, so I didn't really have those expectations until my husband at the time encouraged me in my early 20s to sit an exam and go and study. And I chose psychology because my husband at the time was studying psychiatry, and I was absolutely intrigued with all of the stories. And so from that point on, I think it took me 10 years and 2 children later to come out. Perhaps even longer by the time I finished my doctorate in clinical psychology. And so those early years, I think, gave me a lot of stability, which allowed me the opportunities to take risks in many ways, because I had that stability for, in my childhood and through much of my adulthood as well. And so again, I really have gone way beyond that, what I could have ever imagined for myself as a child, really.
Wow. I mean, this stability is so important because it helps you build that confidence and allows you to take the risks later on, right?
Absolutely. And look, it aligns with a psychological theory, attachment theory, which some of your listeners may or may not be familiar with. And I definitely had a secure attachment. And we know, particularly in childhood, when children have that secure attachment, that they are more willing to go beyond their comfort zone or, step out and take a few little risks. And I've often reflected on that. I did my honours thesis on adult attachment theory. So it's been a theory that's sat with me through my life, and it really does help me to make sense of why I have, I guess, been been brave in many ways because I never really had any role models in business to run my own business. And it's really just been my passion for my work. And I would say, as I mentioned earlier on, that the levels of optimism and I guess hopefulness that and positivity that my parents and my family gave to me to support me in achieving my dreams.
So they kind of were your role models in the end.
Yes, in terms of, I guess, they had a lovely sense of humour. My dad still does. My dad probably was more of a pessimist, although he says to me now, I'm thinking positive, Susie. But my mum, I think, she was very strong. She had some challenges early on in her life, and I had a very strong female role model that was very brave, in fact.
Right. So what do you think, which core beliefs about life and about yourself did you form in those early years that still define you today?
You know what? I think good things happen. Again, I was very privileged. I think I was also born temperamentally with a good temperament. So I've had a very robust and stable mood, which I think has really allowed me to initially do that work clinically with clients that were really struggling. But I think, when you're working with people to help them make those changes in your life, I couldn't possibly be low on optimism or a low hoper, Claudia, because, how would you ever, work as a coach if you had a belief that it's not possible for people to grow and develop. So I think that mindset, came through in my early childhood. I did have an older sister, and she was also quite instrumental in, I guess, developing that positive mindset as well.
Right. But we all know that beliefs can change over time. And that's a good thing because it allows us to do a little bit of weeding, if you like, and to replace some of our maybe limiting beliefs with more supportive ones. And I like to think of that as like kind of cultivating a beautiful garden in your mind. So what were maybe some limiting beliefs that you have personally struggled with and how have you overcome them?
Oh, a lot. So I think I didn't mention, but I actually left school at 16 because, as I said, no one in my family had gone to university. There was no expectation for me to. It was more about, your life path was getting married and having children. And look, that was given with love from my parents, but they just didn't have that, I guess, that mindset themselves. And so it was my partner, who then became my husband, that I guess challenge some of we call them ants in coaching, those automatic negative thoughts. Mm-hmm. So he challenged some of my beliefs, some of my ants around my capacity to go to university, to study, to have a career in psychology. But even in my very first lecture, I remember sitting there and thinking, oh my goodness, what am I doing here? And then the lecturer saying to about 120 of us, there'll only be probably 10 to 15 of you that make it right through if you want to have a career in psychology, that go right through and perhaps even to a doctorate stage. And, I still recall it was one of those defining moments where I had this knowing, which I know people will resonate with. I don't know if there's much science behind this, but I just knew it was going to be me. I just knew it was going to be me. And I hadn't even submitted an essay at that point. And then I think, I started to get the essays back and I started to get feedback that, yes, you're doing okay. Although I also studied English literature and philosophy, and my essays weren't, being marked as well as they were in psychology. So I had a natural affinity. Plus I had a partner at the time who was studying psychiatry. So certainly someone that I could talk to and learn from in the early days of my studies.
Right. Now, the pursuit of happiness is one of those fundamental aspects of human existence, yet it often feels so elusive. How can positive psychology help individuals navigate the complexities of life and find a sense of happiness and fulfillment, even amidst all those challenges and adversities that we encounter?
So, yeah, that is a big question. There's been quite a lot of developments in the field of positive psychology since it launched in around 1998 when Professor Martin Seligman formally founded the field. It was originally, I guess, marketed as a science of happiness. It made the front cover of Time magazine. However, there was quite a lot of pushback around that in terms of concerns around it not being normal to be happy all the time, which I certainly agreed with. As a clinical psychologist, I knew very well that all of the human emotions were important and useful. However, there was a need at the time to, I guess, counteract the focus on all the negatives, which psychology had been very firmly focused on, particularly after the Second World War. And we now have quite a body of research on the study of positive emotions. But PosPsych has now moved to second wave, which is the recognition that it is about the full range of human emotions. It's not about being positive or happy all of the time. And then we've even moved now on to third wave positive psychology, which is about not just so much of an individual focus and what we can do at the individual level, but what we can do at the systems level. So what can we do in organizations and institutions, and recognizing the power of the context that we're operating in and all the situation that we're operating in. And I think that's been really healthy, because even as a clin psych, we were very individually focused. We were trained to look at building, I guess, or uncovering, understanding, and building internal psychological capabilities. Now, I'm still a big supporter of that. I think that we should continue to offer education around psychological literacy and psychological capability. But there's been this growing recognition now, particularly in the workplace, that it's not all up to you. It's not your sole responsibility for your well-being or your flourishing or thriving at work. The actual workplace has a responsibility, and in many cases here in Australia, there are a number of states where there's a legal obligation now from a psychological health and safety perspective. But, we all know that, it doesn't matter how many skills you've got. If you are working in a workplace that is actively undermining your well-being, you're not going to flourish. So it's so wonderful to see, again, the developments in the field of positive psychology. So to answer your question, there is so much there to be gained from an educational perspective around these psychological capabilities. Wellbeing literacy is another term that's being studied at the University of Melbourne at the moment. But there's also so much to learn around workplaces, educational institutions, and what are some of the things that leaders can do or the organisation itself to actively create a thriving workplace.
Yeah, I think that's so important to develop the personal resilience so that we can deal with all the things that we're facing, but also to build those structures that allow people to thrive, as you said. So how can we build this into our systems? And we'll get back to that. But before we do, what are some of the maybe most surprising results of your research into the whole field of positive psychology and coaching psychology? Was there anything that was so surprising that stood out to you?
So my background in research has been primarily focused on coaching psychology interventions or evidence-based coaching interventions. And I did a number of studies fairly early on in my career. I haven't actually been actively involved in research for a number of years now. But the early research I did was looking at how do we use coaching, and we differentiate it from coaching as usual. We call it evidence-based coaching. So there's evidence, there's psychological theory and models that support the coaching approach that we take. A lot of my research was done in educational settings with students and with teachers. And so the studies that I've been involved in have been able to show that using a coaching approach where we're helping people get really clear on their goals. Now, it's not just any goal, it's personally meaningful goals. So we know that goals that are aligned to our values, which is why if I'm working, I still retain a handful of senior clients myself. So if I'm working with those clients one-on-one in exec coaching, one of the first things I will do with them is a values clarification exercise. I've been doing that for years, but it's become increasingly, I guess, recognized, particularly through acceptance and commitment therapy or training, just how important that is for our well-being. So, but I think also importantly for your audience, I know you have a number of listeners that are entrepreneurs or, very ambitious in their pursuit, that for me would be one of the most important things if they have never thought about their core values before, would be to take some time out to think about what matters most. And that, look, I've had a client say to me, Suzy, I need a year. I actually need a year to reflect on that. But for other people, it can be a quicker process. It might be internal, but they've just never made it explicit. They've never actually, written it down and then reflected on how well does my life reflect that that's an important value. And just to, I guess, build a business case for the entrepreneurs, we know that when you set and strive towards these, they're called self-concordant goals in the literature, or authentic goals, there are greater levels of goal attainment. So you're more likely to achieve your goals. And not only that, you'll have greater levels of well-being, because as you progress towards your goals, and in fact, the research says it's not the attainment as such. Sometimes there's a little bit of a letdown when we actually, reach the peak of the summit or the mountain. It's the daily striving for these personally meaningful goals that leads to elevated levels of well-being. And so for me, the coaching as usual, so being clear on your values, the goals that are important to you, and making progress is going to lead to increases in well-being. But now what we are also seeing, and this is the field that I'm, been actively involved in more recently, is positive psychology coaching. So how do we bring in some of the science of positive psychology? So perhaps, whether that's science of gratitude, positive leadership, forgiveness. There's a whole lot of research around prioritizing positivity, wisdom. There's so many different areas that are studied under the umbrella of positive psych. So dependent on the client I'm working with, I guess that's the art. So it's the science and art. So which aspects of the science is going to be relevant for the client that I'm working with here and now. And so we know, as I said, you're going to get that increase in your goal attainment and your well-being and your energy levels too, if we're explicitly bringing your strengths into play through the pursuit of your goals. But if we can also, I guess, more consciously think about the well-being science and weave that in where it's personalized to the individual we're working with, then that can also be an additional benefit to going through that type of coaching program. So that's the research I've done. But as I've made reference to, there's so much research, Claudia, which is one of the challenges, even for somebody like myself who loves the science, to stay on top of it. It's quite challenging.
Yeah, there's so much information out there, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So from your perspective and the work that you've done, what makes a good coach? So for all the people out there who are maybe looking for a coach to help them and support them on their journey, what should they be looking for?
I think the first thing I'd say is, for what purpose are you engaging a coach? So I've personally had 3 coaches in my career so far. The first one helped me make a transition from finishing my academic studies into starting a sole trader business at that point. And it was also involved a location change. So moving out of an area where I had a clientele, a profile, and then I had to transition into a new location where nobody knew me, so that was really helpful in that case. And I had a coach that had worked a lot around transitions. The second coach I had, actually, that was the second coach I had. The first coach I had actually helped me with my doctorate. So he helped me. It was very much related to stress management and, making sure that I met the targets for achieving my doctoral studies. And then the third coach was one when I was established in the new location. I was building a profile, but I wanted to then create a business, not just be a sole trader. So I actually engaged a coach in the US, in New York, and he had done some coaching studies, but he also had an MBA. So I guess in that sense, I wanted a mentor coach. So I think the first piece of advice would be really clear about what you want out of coaching. Is it is it transition? Is it more, as I said, mental coaching, business coaching, where you may want someone that has a business background? I mean, often in coaching, we will say you don't have to be an expert. You can coach anybody. But I think we are increasingly seeing that there may be real benefit in having a coach that has some expertise in the area that you're working in. The kind of coaching that I do primarily now is psychological coaching and what we would call developmental, some call it transformational coaching. So I'm not working with my CEOs that I work with around hitting their KPIs. They're usually pretty adept at that. I'm working with them on some of the, I guess, relationship challenges they have, or helping them to be the best possible leader that they can be, and really uncover, some of the questions you asked me early on, are there some mindsets, and that's a large part of it too, that have been operating that have helped them get to a certain point in their career, but might start to become derailers, going to another level. And that's where the psychology plays a very important part. So if you wanted to do more of that psychological developmental coaching, I'm not saying you'd have to be a registered psychologist, but you'd certainly want someone that had a strong background in psychology to do that sort of work.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think I often approach mine from a neuroscience perspective, which is kind of similar. So we have had some similar findings where we are like, this is working, this is why it's working.
Yeah, exactly. So you would be, and I think, particularly at the moment, people are intrigued. A lot of people are intrigued with neuroscience research. And I usually say, though, Claudia, I'm not sure about you, I'll say to my clients, I love the science. So my approach is that if it's relevant, I would ask you if it's okay to share some science that fits with what what we're talking about right now. And so I usually will talk to the client up front about that. And I find that I get some that go, oh my goodness, I love that. And you send them some articles post the coaching and they say, can you send me more? And then I get others that go, oh, if you could just keep it really, practical and light on, that's my preference. So I think it's always good to check with the client too, what's their preference.
That's true. It has to be very individual and just tailored to what they're looking for. Now, I'm curious to, what do you think is your role? What do you think is the role of technology and social media in today's mental health landscape? Do you think it's a net positive and net negative, or what are just some of the nuances that we should be aware of?
Yes, it's an interesting debate. I mean, there are lots of studies to highlight the negative impacts of social media use. But there was one study, I can't quote the reference right now, it was a colleague of mine down at Melbourne University who found that it was a bit more nuanced than that. It was who was using the social media. So if somebody had a history or was suffering with a clinical disorder in particular, like depression or anxiety, then using social media and making, I guess, social comparisons was detrimental to their well-being. Whereas if it's someone that was traveling pretty well, and they were using it, as I do, for inspiration or for education, then it's going to have a positive impact on your well-being. So I think the research is becoming more nuanced around that, but I think the challenge is for people, the boundaries, isn't it? Or what we might call in psychology, self-regulation, that capacity to self-regulate, self-manage. But although, I think technology is increasingly providing us with some opportunities for reminders of, you've spent so much time on there. Is it time to log off now? So I think hopefully we can use technology for good, rather than evil going forward. And I sit on the Scientific Advisory Council for Coach Hub, which is a global coaching provider through technology. And this approach now is called the democratization of coaching, whereas historically you wouldn't have access to, particularly, I guess, a fairly well-educated and experienced coach unless you were at a senior leader level in an organization. Whereas now through the use of technology, it's making it more cost effective because it's taking away the travel time in having to go in and, see a coachee. And I think it's also making it time efficient as well. So I personally would love to see more people take up coaching rather than waiting, before things derail and then perhaps having to seek out therapeutic support. I also have been quite verbal in terms of entrepreneurs, startups, not prioritising coaching support. And I know myself as a small business owner, there are, often tight budgets and we're always, watching cash flow. But I think if you can see, and I'm pretty good now at building a business case for this, that the investment in yourself and the business can actually save you a lot of money and fast track some of those goals that you've set for yourself in the business.
Absolutely. That's why I'm working on creating a business mastermind right now, where we can all come together and have this coaching component. So it's kind of like a hybrid program between a mastermind and a coaching program where we have the best of both worlds.
I love that. We actually ran a mastermind for educators that were trying to implement positive education programs in schools. And we ran that for 12 months, Claudia. And it was brilliant. So we would, as you said, bring in some education to start with, but then the benefit or the opportunities to hear from the participants, there was so much learning and creativity to be gained from hearing from peers.
Yeah, it's amazing. Now, going back to social media for a moment, if you could reimagine social media in a way that's, say, less detrimental to the majority of people and more uplifting and inspiring, what would that look like? And how could we tap into this power of social connection to really help each other become better versions of ourselves?
Wow, that's a great question, Claudia. It's got me thinking. I think, I do reflect. I have a daughter who I'm actually grandparent now, and I know, I've become aware that there's just so much more information out there. Like I mentioned, I did my honours on adult attachment. No one had heard about it when I did my honours on adult attachment. Now you can see all this information for young parents about attachment. Psychology is much more open. It's being, given to the world. Have people like Esther Perel, who I went to see recently here in Australia, and the auditorium was booked out, So I think we're really seeing psychology being brought out to the masses much more open. So I would love to continue to see social media being used as a forms of education. I guess the challenge is, which it is in the broader health and wellness sector, is sorting the wheat from the chaff. And I think there's a great role to help, and this does happen in a lot of schools, but I'd like to see it happen more broadly, where we're learning to become better critical thinkers and how to assess the information that's given to us, because I think that's the danger in this day and age is is this truth or is it fake news? So I'd love to see social media continue to be used for education around what you can do to build your psychological well-being. And I think, if we could have the algorithms be showing more positive news and uplifting news, because historically the nightly news, I think there's been studies to show that there's a high correlation with watching the nightly news, which I shared with my elderly dad, because he used to watch, I think, four different channels from 4 p.m. until 7 p.m. at night. And I had to share with him the news that it's not good for your mood, Dad.
No, it's not. Yeah.
They'll put 5 minutes of the good news story of the week, maybe once a week. So, there has been some there's been some debate around what's known as the positivity ratio. So that concept has been hotly debated. There's been some research that has been withdrawn in that area, but we do know generally that those people that are flourishing are experiencing more of these positive emotions of joy. It's called elevation, which is a positive moral emotion, awe, gratitude, but it's not as if, as I said earlier on, it's not as if we don't experience any sadness. If we have a loss like I have recently, that would not be normal if I didn't let myself sit with that. So I think we have also had this backlash around what's known as toxic positivity. I would hate to see that go too far, because we definitely need some positivity. We need to help people to maintain a hopeful and optimistic mindset, but we also need to normalize for people that it's okay to have these more challenging emotions, which, whether that's sadness or anger or fear, disappointment, that's quite normal, and we shouldn't try to get rid of them. That it's actually more healthy to be able to learn to sit with them, as uncomfortable as that can be. But there's great information that we can get from being curious about our thoughts and our emotions. And some of these newer psychological approaches like ACT gives us the message that it's okay to sit with the discomfort, and as long as we're moving in a committed way towards our goals, our authentic goals that are aligned with our values. So I think, the messaging I'd love going forward is much more nuanced. It's not black and white, that it's okay to be hopeful and positive, and it's also okay if something happens to be upset or angry or whatever. But hopefully we have some of the skills to not let that sit with us for too long, that when we need to shift gears, after we've sat with it, we've processed it, we think about what we can do, then, and depending again on the context, we may need to shift gears, pick ourselves up, put on some mood boosting music or whatever it is, to help uplift us to get through the day and our lives.
Yeah, that is so true. I mean, it's, as you said, it's uncomfortable to just sit with those emotions, and a lot of people are trying to avoid it. And I know it's probably a human tendency to just avoid these kind of feelings. But I think these challenges can be incredible teaching moments.
Absolutely.
Sometimes they teach us so much more than the successes we have in our lives, if we really just take a moment to sit with that and to understand what lessons can be learned from that experience.
It's so true. And it also speaks to the benefit of having a self-reflective space, or a reflective space. So in coaching, we often say it provides a beautiful opportunity to have for self-reflection in coaching. And of course, if you're working with someone, they're helping as part of that process. But so many people, as you know, Claudia, have just such busy lives that there's no space. And that's one of my first questions I'll ask my coachees is, where is your reflective space? There's a wonderful book by a colleague of mine, Dr. Adam Fraser, here in Australia, called The Third Space. It's been around for quite a while, and he talks about the benefit, particularly in going to work or coming home. And that became quite challenging through COVID, where there weren't many boundaries, or even for people now that are continuing, to work from home or hybrid work. But the third space was trying to find a space, whether it was on your commute or sitting in the car for 5 minutes before you came inside or went into work, where you could really think about, who do I want to be going into this space? Or what have I just learned from the last experience, or, processing some of that and then setting an intention for the next space that you're moving into.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people struggle with the constant change and pressure they experience every day. And now we're coming just out of this huge pandemic. Then there's the war in Ukraine that's still raging. There's inflation, there's recession, all the things. And then there's this incredibly fast advance in AI technology that's going to disrupt a lot of industries again.
Absolutely.
So I think it's fair to say that people are having a really, really hard time right now, just adjusting and keeping a positive mindset when they're facing just one challenge after the other. There's so many obligations to juggle, never enough time, too much drama. So from your perspective, what are some key strategies or techniques that individuals can utilize to really build and maintain resilience during times of crisis and uncertainty?
Yeah, so there are plenty of psychological strategies, but I would say the foundation, we use the acronym MEDS. Are you taking your MEDS, which stands for meditation. So for an entrepreneur, particularly in a very ambitious entrepreneur, that I would say is a non-negotiable, is having some form of meditation. Now, prayer can be a form of meditation. There are various forms of meditation, but in a nutshell, it's giving your brain a rest from all of the thinking, and it's also building up your attentional muscle. So if you've ever practiced meditation or mindfulness in particular, you'll know that the skill is noticing, having an anchor first and foremost, whether that's your breath or a mantra. When your mind wanders, as it will, bringing it back. When it wanders, bringing it back. And so that process to me is much like going to the gym, building up your bicep muscle. So we can build up our attentional muscle. Then when we need to maintain attentional focus, we can, and we can engage in what's also known as attentional control. So we can park things when we need to, and come back to it. So we need to be on the ball for a meeting. We can put that aside. I mean, sometimes it might be too hard to do that. In that case, I would recommend perhaps you postpone the meeting, but you do get better with this process of being able to park things, but definitely coming back to them. So meditation, exercise, I think most people know that. Whether they're actually, living that, I guess I would question. I always do that with my own coachees. We need regular form of exercise. Again, something that is going to slot into your lifestyle. If it's too hard, it's not going to happen. Diet, so mood, food, alcohol intake. There's a lot now on social media about, I guess, the negative impacts of alcohol use. And then sleep, which, as you would know as a neuroscientist, completely affects our functioning. I know myself, I'm someone that has to really prioritize my sleep, and I know that I'm not going to function as well if I haven't slept well. And I also am a big fan of the afternoon naps. So if I get it, yeah, you are too. Yes. And so I've trained myself to have 15 minutes, 20 minutes, so I can wake up naturally after 15 to 20 minutes. So you want that foundation of health, to support your physical health as well. And then there's a whole lot of psychological strategies like mindset strategies. I mentioned ACT, cognitive behavioral techniques. There's a whole lot of mood strategies, gratitude interventions, forgiveness interventions. We call it prioritizing positivity. So thinking about your weekly schedule, what are the or who are the people, or what are the places, what are the activities that you know are going to boost your mood, and then intentionally ensuring that you've got that in your diary, so you're going to get that mood boost. There's just so many things that you can do. Being really clear about your motivation. I mentioned values, so that's when meaning comes into it. I think for an entrepreneur, being really clear about their values, being really clear about why they're running the business, because when motivation wanes, as it will, having that reminder of why am I doing it, and particularly having that, we call it in coaching, the fuzzy vision. So you want your shorter term goals, but you want to keep that vision, the longer term vision, pretty fuzzy, but aligned to your values. And you want to be agile, keep your eyes open, because sometimes, as you know, Claudia, paths are emerging. This is all part of this VUCA world that we're in. And if we're too set on a pathway, we don't have the openness to see the other potential pathways emerging. And one of the benefits, just for people to be aware of, in prioritizing positivity and positive emotions, is the research tells us when we experience positive emotions, our visual perception broadens. So we see more in our environment. We're more creative. So you want to invest proactively and intentionally in building your positivity as much as you can.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, it's kind of like the filters through which you see the world. So if your filter is not set right, you won't see all the opportunities that are hiding in plain sight.
Absolutely. But I usually say you don't want to read a detailed report if you're too happy, because the research tells us that you miss mistakes. You're not good with detail if you're too happy.
That's true. Now, I've seen a statistic that says that entrepreneurs struggle with mental health even more than the general public. So a few years ago, there was this Business Insider article that stated that 7% of the general population report suffering from depression, while 30% of founders reported dealing with its effect, and 50% of those experience burnout eventually. So why do you think that is, and what can entrepreneurs do to safeguard against those tendencies?
There's so many pressures. I think I know from, again, research here in Australia, it was for the general population, but I know in running my own business as well, that the financial stressors as running, if it's a startup or if it's a small business, you're constantly looking for your pipeline, ensuring your cash flow, ensuring you're paying your people if you've got people. So I think an investment in having a good solid foundation and plan, having a good accounting and financial support. I think it probably would fit in with that acronym MEDS. We'd have to put an F in there somewhere. So you certainly want that. But I think, you really, particularly in the early days, you're doing everything. You're you may be the CFO, the chief people officer. You're basically trying to do everything. So I mean, I've done a lot of education myself in trying to grow a business. And one of the key takeaways for me was to start to plot out your org chart. So you might not have all of those places filled yet, but start to think about who you will potentially delegate to. I think always thinking about, a phased growth approach. What are the other challenges I think that lead to this is working ridiculously long hours. Again, I'm hearing that. I worked many weekends in the early start of my business, and I don't think, I think the research would support that too, that is supportive of our creativity or our well-being. So it can be hard to do, particularly if you're really passionate about the area that you're working in. You become, what the research tells us, is obsessive passion rather than harmonious passion. So obsessive passion has been shown to detract from well-being, because you're so solely focused on one area that you're neglecting your relationships, for example. So I think in some ways, engaging a coach just to look at your work-life timetable and ensuring that you are, not too obsessive with your sole focus. But I think the reality is, in running a business, you do have to be prepared to work hard. But I would also say ensuring that all of those guardrails are there to support your well-being, and having a good support system around you as much as you can.
Yeah, you really have to create this foundation for sustainable growth. Otherwise, you run out of steam.
Absolutely. And look, if you think about elite athletes, they all have downtime, or what's referred to in the research as oscillations. Mm-hmm. So an oscillation is that I guess space between energy exertion and then that re-energization process. So we can't maintain, we hear about high performance cultures, and I always say to the organizations I'm working with, yes, I understand that, but where are the oscillations? Where are the mini breaks? Where are your micro breaks? So ideally we're looking for micro breaks throughout the day, and brief mindfulness meditations can be a great way to get that, or even just taking yourself out into the sun, getting your daily dose of vitamin D and a little bit of exercise can be helpful there. You want your mini breaks quarterly scheduled in advance. It also gives you that anticipatory joy, knowing that you've got something to look forward to. And then you want your, I guess, those major breaks through the year, which might be the longer term sort of annual holiday. Again, as a business owner, that can be tricky to navigate, but trying to plan towards that, I think, is something to consider.
Yeah, definitely. Now, before we go, what does your own big, bold vision for the future look like? What goals would you like to achieve within, say, the next 1 or 2 years?
Yes. Well, I would love to see a lot of the work that I've been, a lot of the work that I've been creating over the last 10 years in this business and longer than that before that, is to be able to scale it up, to be able to take it out more broadly to the audiences that we work with. One thing we have created, or I've created, is a digital program. So I invested in the production of that pre-COVID, which was actually really good timing. So we were able to offer that to organisations in the US, for example, through COVID for their staff without me being there. So I would love to be able to, transform or translate some of the content. I've got a lot of wonderful content, and I'm hoping to find some ways to scale that up, and ideally through technology.
And last but not least, where can our listeners find you online if they would like to learn more about you or just connect with you?
Oh, absolutely. So they feel free to connect with me through LinkedIn. I have lots of connections there. Connect is one of my top strengths, and I love being connected with people. But our website would be the primary place to find out more information about the services. And when I say we, so it's not just me. I have around 15 or more associates in Australia, one in the UK at the moment, looking to expand over there, hopefully in the next 12 months. But I also, we have a Facebook page, but if you want to learn more about me and how I do my very best to walk the talk, so more of my personal posts are on Instagram, Dr. Suzy G. So please feel free to follow me through Instagram as well.
Oh, perfect. Suzy, thank you so much for sharing your tips and all your insights with us today. It's been such an honor having you on the show.
Thank you so much, Claudia. And I think this is such an important audience that you're working with at the moment. So thank you for the work that you do.
Oh, absolutely. Take care and talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks, Claudia. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Wired for Success podcast. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. That's a fantastic, easy, and zero-cost way to help the show grow. Just use the link in the show notes and make my day. If you'd like to take it one step further, you can now join my inner circle and become an official supporter of the Wired for Success podcast. Supporting the show is super simple and will only take about 30 seconds. Basically, it works like any other paid subscription. All you have to do is to go to glow.fm/wiredforsuccesspodcast, pay $5 per month or as much or as little as you like, and choose the link of the podcast player you want to use. You can listen anywhere in any app. So for less than the price of 1 to 2 fancy coffees per month, you can really make a difference and help me keep this show awesome. For more tips and info, check out my website at wiredforsuccess.solutions. Thanks a ton and talk to you soon.